Welcome back to Econline, everybody. This is our Phillips curve bonus round because we're going to look at an actual AP question on Phillips curve and look at its connections to the ASAD diagram and so on. This is a 2009 Form A, so let's see, 2009. And a thing to note about this is question 1, and it threw a lot of kids off because although you spent a whole semester in macro at that point and you have gone through all of this stuff about ASAD diagram, you'd almost expect to see it in question 1, and they never actually ask you to draw it here. They ask you to draw Phillips curve and then use Phillips curve to show that you understand ASAD. So that's what we're going to do as we answer this question. Now, remember that the AP exam is grading by addition, meaning that this question is setting forth a list of tasks that you have to complete. And each time you complete these tasks, you get points. So there's a certain number of points available. On this one, there happens to be 12 points. Now, I recommend you pause the video for a minute and go ahead and try to solve this question yourself and go through all the steps before watching the rest of the instruction. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our first and foremost task on an AP question, which is to underline the verbs. So the verbs tell you what you have to do when you answer this question. So we have our prompt here, and this whole using or assume that the United States economy is in long-run equilibrium. All right, so we're going to use the graph. They say show current long-run equilibrium point. Using the graph is kind of I'd call it like half a verb, right? So you have to show the long-run equilibrium point as point A, and obviously reading the rest of the question, understand what you need to do there. We're going to calculate. It says what open market operation, that would be like state. So there's the verb for that. We're going to show again. This is how will it change. So again, that's another state. And then also explain, which is different than state. Again, this is a state, right? What will happen to each of the following? And we have one explain here as well. So we have to state both of these, but we have to explain the short-run Phillips curve. So this tells you what you need to do in order to get the points on this exam or on this question. All right, now let's go on and look at how we would answer it. An important thing to remember on AP exams as well is to make sure that you answer every part of the question and you try to stay consistent and just try to work your way through. Don't panic about what you see all the way down here in question F until you've answered the other parts, because typically they lead you down the path. All right, so question A is using a correctly labeled graph with both short and long-run Phillips curve and the relevant numbers from above, show the current long-run equilibrium is point A. Okay, so we are going to draw our axes, and it's Phillips curve. So we have unemployment and inflation. We have a long-run Phillips curve, and we have a short-run Phillips curve. Now, note that this is just memorizing a graph to get to this point. So, even if you really didn't understand what was going on, you can essentially get the first point just by drawing this from memory, because it's telling you need to draw a Phillips curve diagram. And that's what I mean about attempting every question and giving your best effort and staying consistent, because you can pick up a lot of points, and those can make a difference when it comes time to the final distribution and your score. Okay, so this is our first part, but it also says that we have to label the equilibrium as point A, and we have to use the numbers from above. So they give us an unemployment rate of 5% and an inflation rate of 6%. So here is our 6%, and here is our 5%. And this is what you would need to do to get all the points for question A. B, calculate the real interest rate. Now, this is not a difficult question, but it's you have to show the calculation. So sometimes students will just write the answer, and that's not a good idea. Calculate means formula, set up formula, solve. Sometimes it's kind of obvious or simple or tedious, but it's worth it because again, you're trying to demonstrate to the grader that you know the material. All right, so we know that real I is equal to nominal I minus inflation. So it is 8% minus 6%, and that's just the given information from the question itself. So the real interest rate is 2%. Not too bad at all. All right, but again, calculate means you need to show how you arrived at the answer. All right, now we have to name an open market operation because the Fed is going to target an inflation rate of 3%. All right, so we're at 6% right now, and we're going to target an inflation rate of 3%. So if the Fed is trying to lower inflation, that's contractionary monetary policy, which means that they would have to sell bonds. And it does, by the way, have to be sell bonds because it specifically says open market operation. And so that's why it couldn't be the reserve requirement or the discount rate in this case. Question D. So we have to use the money market to show how the Federal Reserve's action will affect the nominal rate. Now, we'll see as we go over the final question at the end that they are kind of walking you, as I said, down the path to set you up to see a lot of the ASAD in the background, even though to this point we haven't had to draw it yet or anything like that. Okay, so this is the money market, so we have nominal I, we have the quantity of money, the supply of money, and the demand for money. So we want to make sure that we're drawing and labeling out our graph because, again, we get points for this. So, all right, so here's our graph of the money market, and the question says to show how the Federal Reserve's action would affect the nominal rate. So we're going to sell bonds, right? That's what we're doing. So that's going to decrease the money supply, and that will increase, I'll change colors here to make that a little easier to see, which will increase the nominal rate. So this is the answer to D, and you might even want to write on the side, nominal I increase. Okay, question E. How will the interest rate change that you identified in A affect aggregate demand in the short run? Explain. All right, now the explain is the key thing because you have to explain how we get from an interest rate change to a change in aggregate demand. So 2 points there, one for getting through that sequence and then 2 for coming up with the right, or the second point for coming up with the right answer. All right, so now it's probably sensible for us to just take a look at how this question is really unfolding in terms of the ASAD diagram. We have started off in equilibrium. Potential output, AD equals C plus I plus G plus XN. There you go. It's just a bit. It's intersecting at PO, we'll say. And so here's our short-run aggregate supply. So the Fed has decided to target this lower inflation rate. They have contracted the money supply. So by contracting the money supply, we know that that affects investment and also the consumption part of aggregate demand because consumers borrow as well. So higher interest rates, higher nominal rates, presumably leading to higher real rates as well, are going to decrease aggregate demand, and that's what we have to write out. So you can say AD decrease because an increase in the nominal interest rate caused a decrease in consumption and investment. And we might even say both determinants of aggregate demand. Oops. So that is our answer for E. There's 2 parts to this again. You have to, we have the AD increase for a point, and then the idea that you're going from the nominal interest rate to consumption and investment to AD. That's the relationship or the sequence they need to see. And this means that you understand. Okay, so now our last question is, assume the Federal Reserve action is successful, what will happen as we approach new long-run equilibrium? All right, so let's come back to our initial graph here. Now, you don't have to draw this. I'm going to draw this stuff in here. Note for our answer here, all we need to do is state and explain. So let's just go ahead and do that, or we'll write that out. So we have F1 and 2. All right, and here's where our situation has gone. The Fed has pursued this lower inflation rate as we talked about. This is going to be an unexpected change in the price level. So an unexpected change in the price level, we have this movement, a decrease in demand. So when demand shifts to the left, we're going to have movement along the short-run Phillips curve to the right. So we would move here in phase 1, or as a result of the Fed's action. It's like moving along the curve. All right, so that's as a result of the decrease in aggregate demand. So that already has happened. Assuming that this action is successful, what will happen? And they assume it's successful means that assume eventually they convince people of these to have new inflationary expectations. What will happen as we approach long-run equilibrium to the short-run Phillips curve and the natural rate of unemployment? All right, so this is just taking us back then to a long-run adjustment scenario from Phillips curve like we looked at in the previous videos. So we know that if aggregate demand is held low and we are in this output level that's below potential for too long, the high unemployment is going to drive down wages. Those wages are an input price, and as that input price goes down, aggregate supply is going to increase, and that brings us back to equilibrium, but at a lower price level. So, we had started off at this level, at price level 1. In the short run, we ended up at price level 2, and I'll just change that to price level 3. On the Phillips curve, remember, a rightward shift of AS is going to be a leftward shift of the Phillips curve, which will happen as expectations adjust. And that's going to be the explain part over here. So SRPC will shift to the right as inflationary expectations adjust. So you're getting both the what happened and why. And then for question 2, what will happen to the natural rate of unemployment? Well, we have had nothing in either of these scenarios up here that would indicate a change in the natural rate of unemployment. So all we have to do at that point is state that natural rate of unemployment is unchanged. So if you look at my answer here, in spite of the sloppy handwriting, I just want to point out again that what you see on this diagram is completely unnecessary in terms of you don't have to draw this to get your answer. So we could have taken this off, and our adjustments here on this diagram, I just walked through to show you, but it doesn't say that you have to show that in the question. So we could have gone with our original Phillips curve graph over here and never drawn this, and then what we have for this and written in here would have sufficed for the rest of the answer to get all points. So we had 2 points in the first question for drawing the graph correctly and then getting the numbers right for the equilibrium point, calculating the nominal or the real rate from the nominal and inflation, stating that we'd sell bonds. That's just a 1-point question. Showing on drawing the correct money market graph and then showing how this affects the nominal rate in the end. Now, here we just state that AD decreases because of this relationship here. And then finally in F, we explain that Phillips curve shifts to the left as, shifts to the right as I've written that out wrong. This should say shifts to the left. Sorry about that. That Phillips curve shifts to the left as inflationary expectations adjust. So, again, the point here just for stating and explaining our answers. So this is how you get full credit on that question.